A courtroom bursts into laughter when a 17-year-old walks in to defend a man accused of fraud. The judge mocks him. The opposing lawyer smirks. Everyone's sure this kid is about to embarrass himself. But what happens next leaves the entire room speechless, because this teenager isn't just a student. He's a secret legal prodigy about to destroy their case. Order in the court. The judge's voice cracked like a whip, echoing through the grand, oak-paneled room. All eyes turned as the heavy double doors creaked open. In walked a boy, no more than 17, moving cautiously down the aisle. His sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floor, each step sounding far too casual for the tension in the room. He wasn't dressed like anyone else there. No polished suit, no crisp tie, just a slightly oversized hoodie, faded jeans, and a worn backpack slung over one shoulder. The backpack looked like it belonged in a high school chemistry lab, not in a courtroom filled with lawyers, journalists, and stern-faced officials. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is he someone's intern? Did he get lost? Why is there a kid in here? Even the bailiff tilted his head, unsure whether to stop him or let him pass. But the boy didn't break his stride. He walked straight to the defense table, calmly placed his bag on the chair, and began taking out a few neatly organized folders. The judge, an older man with a reputation for being sharp-tongued, leaned forward with a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Son, are you lost? This is a courtroom, not a school hallway. The room erupted in laughter. A few jurors exchanged amused glances. The opposing lawyer, a tall man in an expensive suit, chuckled openly, shaking his head as if this was some kind of prank. But the boy, Ethan, didn't flinch. He looked up, meeting the judge's eyes without hesitation. There was no anger, no embarrassment, only quiet confidence hiding beneath his calm exterior. He slid one of his folders forward, opened it, and began arranging his notes like he had done this 100 times before. The judge raised an eyebrow but said nothing more, clearly assuming this kid would be gone within minutes. Across the room, a reporter quickly scribbled in her notepad. The sight of a teenager in the defense seat was too unusual to ignore. Camera lenses clicked softly. Ethan finally spoke, his voice clear and steady. No, Your Honor. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The laughter died down almost instantly. The judge blinked, caught off guard by the boy's tone. The opposing lawyer gave a small, dismissive laugh and muttered something under his breath, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes now. Ethan continued organizing his papers, unfazed by the stares. His hands moved with precision, his eyes scanning the documents like he was preparing for a battle no one else could see coming. No one in that courtroom knew who he really was. They didn't know why he was there, and they definitely didn't know that this so-called kid had spent years preparing for this very moment. In just a few hours, he would turn this trial, and everyone's expectations, completely upside down. His name was Ethan Miles. On paper, he was just an ordinary high school student from a quiet town, someone you'd expect to see at a basketball game on Friday nights, not standing in the middle of a courtroom. His grades were good, but not the kind that made headlines. He kept to himself, wore the same worn hoodie almost every day, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. But beneath that unassuming surface, Ethan carried a secret. Since he was 13, he had been studying law, not for a school project, not for fun, but with a burning, personal purpose. It began one night when their world collapsed. His father, a hard-working mechanic who had never broken the law, was accused of stealing from a customer. The charges were serious. The police claimed they had evidence, and in a matter of weeks, Ethan's father was sitting in a jail cell, awaiting trial. The family couldn't afford a good lawyer. The court assigned them a public defender who seemed overworked, underprepared, and uninterested. Ethan watched every hearing, every document, every piece of so-called evidence that was thrown at his father, and each time, he felt the same helplessness and the same anger. That was the night Ethan made himself a promise. One day, I'll know the law better than anyone. No one in my family, or anyone else, will ever be trapped like this again. From that moment on, his life changed. While other kids played video games or went to the movies, Ethan spent his nights surrounded by thick law textbooks borrowed from the library. He read about famous trials, memorized legal terminology, and studied case law like his life depended on it, because in his mind it did. By 16, he had finished reading an entire legal reference library. He knew how to draft motions, cite precedents, and even understood courtroom etiquette better than some practicing attorneys. He would spend hours watching live-streamed court trials online, pausing and rewinding whenever he heard an objection, making notes about why it was sustained or overruled. Then came an opportunity he never expected. His state had a rare, little-known program for junior advocates, highly gifted legal prodigies who could assist in real cases under the supervision of a licensed attorney. Most participants were law school students in their 20s. Ethan was the youngest applicant in the program's history. Against all odds, he was accepted. His first case? Defending a small business owner accused of fraud, a case that seemed impossible to win. But Ethan wasn't afraid of impossible. He'd been facing impossible since the day his father was arrested. Still, there was one enormous obstacle standing in his way. Nobody in that courtroom believed in him. Not the judge, not the jury, not even the opposing lawyer, who saw him as nothing more than a kid playing dress-up. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to. The case was about a small business owner accused of fraud, specifically redirecting funds from a government grant into a private account. On the surface, the evidence looked damning. Bank statements, email records, even a supposed witness lined up against the defendant. The prosecution's attorney, Mr. Victor Grayson, was a courtroom veteran, tall, sharply dressed, and with a voice that carried authority. He had a reputation for crushing inexperienced opponents. To him, today's trial was just another easy win, especially with the so-called teen lawyer on the other side. Judge Henry Morrison, a man whose words could slice through steel, studied Ethan with thinly veiled disbelief. The judge had seen hundreds of attorneys come and go, but never one who still looked like he should be taking algebra tests. "Kid," Morrison said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "do you even know what objection means?" A ripple of laughter spread across the room. Even Mr. Grayson allowed himself a smirk. Ethan didn't flinch. He met the judge's gaze and said, clearly and firmly, "Yes, Your Honor, and I also know when it's appropriate to use it." The courtroom fell silent. Grayson's smirk faltered ever so slightly. Morrison raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. Grayson began presenting his opening arguments, his voice smooth and confident. He called his first witness, a supposed financial consultant who claimed to have reviewed the defendant's accounts. Ethan sat perfectly still, his eyes locked on the witness, analyzing every word. Then, mid-sentence, he rose to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is making speculative statements without evidence to support them." A few heads turned. The judge paused, then slowly nodded. "Sustained, but don't get cocky, son." Ethan didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply sat back down, flipping to the next page in his notes. But that was just the beginning. As the trial continued, Ethan's objections came with pinpoint precision. Whenever Mr. Grayson attempted to slip in hearsay, Ethan was on his feet. If a witness strayed off topic or made an assumption, Ethan called it out, backing every objection with exact case law he had memorized. At first, the audience had been waiting for him to fail. Now, they were leaning forward in their seats, captivated. The once dismissive jurors were taking him seriously. Even Judge Morrison, who had mocked him just minutes earlier, was watching more closely. Grayson, however, was getting frustrated. Each time he tried to regain control of the narrative, Ethan blocked him, calmly, methodically, and with surgical accuracy. It was a chess match, and Ethan was forcing the seasoned attorney into defense. The laughter from earlier had vanished completely. The courtroom was silent, except for the rustle of papers and the steady sound of Ethan's voice dismantling the prosecution's case, one piece at a time. For the first time that day, Mr. Grayson realized this wasn't going to be the easy win he had expected. Then came the turning point, the moment everyone thought would seal the case against Ethan's client. Mr. Grayson rose from his chair, a confident smile on his face. "Your Honor," he announced, "the prosecution would like to present Exhibit C, the final piece of evidence that will remove all doubt about the defendant's guilt." The bailiff carried over a thick folder and handed it to Judge Morrison. Inside was a financial statement, showing a large sum of money transferred from the business owner's account into what appeared to be a suspicious offshore account. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A few jurors exchanged grim looks. The defendant, sitting beside Ethan, dropped his head into his hands. It looked like the case was over. But Ethan didn't panic. Instead, he leaned forward, studying the document intently. His eyes scanned each number, each date, each stamp on the page. Then he stood, calm as ever. "Your Honor," Ethan said, "I request to cross-examine the forensic accountant who verified this document." Judge Morrison hesitated for a moment. This was an unusual request at this stage of the trial, but his curiosity got the better of him. "Proceed." The accountant, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit, took the stand. He seemed relaxed, even smug, certain that his testimony would put the final nail in the defense's coffin. Ethan approached, holding a printed copy of the document. "You claim this account belongs to my client, correct?" "Yes," the accountant replied without hesitation. Ethan tilted his head, almost as if he were puzzled. "Then perhaps you can help me understand something. Why does this account number match the one assigned to a federal government grant program for disaster relief?" A ripple of whispers ran through the gallery. The accountant blinked, caught off guard. I'd have to double-check." Ethan didn't let him finish. "And another thing, why is your copy of this document an outdated photocopy, missing the updated routing information that appears on the original bank records?" The accountant froze, his lips parting but no words coming out. The silence was deafening. Ethan's voice grew sharper, more commanding. "According to federal banking law, Section 1344, knowingly providing falsified financial evidence is a federal offense punishable by up to 30 years in prison. Would you like me to read the full statute for you?" The accountant swallowed hard. "That won't be necessary." The murmur in the room swelled into a low roar. Judge Morrison's eyes widened, and he leaned back in his chair, staring at Ethan as if truly seeing him for the first time. Across the aisle, Mr. Grayson's confidence had evaporated. He was flipping through his notes in a panic, desperately trying to find a way to recover. But deep down, he knew. The case was slipping away from him. In a matter of minutes, the kid, everyone laughed, had just ripped the prosecution's strongest evidence to shreds. By the end of the trial, the case had completely collapsed. The once towering stack of accusations against the small business owner had been dismantled, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to stand on. The jury deliberated for less than 20 minutes before returning with their verdict. Not guilty. A wave of relief washed over the defendant, who turned to Ethan with tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. Ethan gave a small smile. "Just keep your business honest. That's thanks enough." Judge Morrison shuffled his papers, clearly deep in thought. The man who, just hours ago, had mocked Ethan for looking out of place, now regarded him with a very different expression, one of respect. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. "Young man," he said slowly, as if choosing each word with care, "I owe you an apology. I underestimated you. That was exceptional work. Some lawyers spend decades in this court and never show that level of precision." The compliment hung in the air like a rare gift. Ethan simply nodded. "I wasn't here to prove myself, Your Honor," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "I was here to prove the truth." The room fell silent for a moment, and then the applause began. At first, it was just a few people in the back. Then more joined in. The sound grew louder until the entire courtroom, from the gallery to the jury box, was clapping. Even Mr. Grayson, the opposing attorney, who had been so sure of victory, rose from his seat. He walked over to Ethan, extended his hand, and muttered with a reluctant smile, "Remind me never to go against you again." Ethan shook his hand, but there was no gloating, no arrogance, just quiet determination in his eyes. As he packed his bag, the crowd still murmuring in amazement, Ethan glanced at the defendant one last time. "Take care," he said simply, then slung his backpack over his shoulder. When he stepped outside, the crisp afternoon air hit his face. The courthouse doors shut behind him, sealing the echoes of the trial inside. Reporters were already gathering on the steps, calling his name, eager to hear from the teenage legal prodigy. But Ethan didn't stop for interviews. He didn't want fame. He didn't want headlines. All he wanted was to get to his next case, to keep doing what he had set out to do years ago. Fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. That day, a lesson echoed in everyone's mind. Never judge someone by their age, because brilliance has no minimum requirement. As Ethan walked down the courthouse steps, blending back into the world where he looked like just another high school kid, he knew one thing for sure. In a world full of doubters, the only thing that truly mattered was results. And Ethan Miles was just getting started. And that's how a teenager turned an entire courtroom upside down. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these unbelievable tales. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next jaw-dropping story. Until then, stay curious,